There's that. But John pressed me. He said, but you're not appalled by Trump. I'm appalled. I'm appalled. He's an idiot. Yeah. He's an asshole. He's a moron. He's venal. And you seem, Glenn, to always be, kind of halfway apologizing for him. To which I responded, no, Trump did many appalling things. And I, like others, was appalled by the appalling things he did. On the other hand, I know that there's scores of millions of people who support him. And I know that he speaks for them when he talks about the border or when he talks about China or whatever. And in the culture war of which Trump is one participant, I'm not with those coastal elites. I'm with the blue collar Catholic cultural conservative auto worker in Youngstown, Ohio, or something like that. We're underway here, Rob. How you doing, man?
I'm doing excellent. Thank you for having me on, Glenn.
You're welcome. I know it's long overdue. You're going to probably complain about that. But let me just tell anybody who has stumbled upon this podcast that this is Glenn Loury. This is The Glenn Show. I'm a professor at Brown University. I'm also the John Paulson Fellow, Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute, which sponsors The Glenn Show. And I'm with Rob Montz. Rob is a filmmaker. Rob and I have collaborated on a number of his projects. He makes documentaries. Rob is somewhat conservative. I think it's fair to say that. And he chooses these provocative topics to investigate in his filmmaking way. We've collaborated on a number of different shorts that Rob has made about the treatment by Harvard of Roland Fryer, about the threat to free speech on campuses, including our own Brown University, where Rob is an alum. About the Asians' anti-affirmative action case and so on, other stuff too. Kanye and Donald Trump, Rob did a thing on that. So it's about time for me to reciprocate and have Rob on my show. He's had me on his show on a number of occasions. So welcome, Rob. Good to be talking to you, man.
Finally got an invite on. Yeah, I mean, and again, I discovered you because you and I did not overlap when I was at Brown. I discovered you through this show, but that would have been 8-9 years ago when it was old school blogging heads.
Yeah.
So it's it feels like it's it's a full karmic loop. Yeah. Man, we've done some incredible things. I really appreciate the invite. We're cooking up some new stuff now.
Yeah, I want to know what you're up to. I was especially intrigued by this most recent piece of yours that I saw, interviewing at length Roy Beck, who is an immigration, how do you put it, restrictionist? Is that a fair way of saying it? I mean, he's concerned about unauthorized entry into the country of large numbers of people. And what's the name of his organization, Roy?
It's called Numbers USA, Roy Beck. I think you found it so compelling because he mostly said that all the great civil rights luminaries of the last 200 years agree with Professor Glenn Loury when it comes to illegal immigration. or I mean, at least the idea that to be a upstanding Black citizen doesn't mean you need to march in lockstep with the Democratic Party orthodoxy as it relates to how you're supposed to feel about immigration and illegal immigration.
Well, that's a better way of expressing my view. I think that I'm not against so much immigration as I am concerned about the assimilation of African-American interest to the project of making it easier for people to get into the country and stay in the country who do not have authorization. It's not obvious to me that that's kind of crusade that Black people should be getting behind. And at least I'd like to see some debate amongst African Americans about it.
Mine was more about opening up space, right? And it was just an interview. And I feel as if we've gotten an opportunity on our channel to talk to some of my intellectual heroes, including you, including Andrew Sullivan, including Charles Murray. And to a person, if I ask them on or off camera, what is the one particular policy issue you found yourself most radically departing from over the last 10 years? And most of these guys like Sullivan or Murray are kind of proper libertarians, old school libertarians. To a person, they've said immigration. It kept coming up, right? And I related to that because, again, I was steeped in pure big L libertarianism right after I graduated from school. My very first job was at the Cato Institute. And back at the Cato Institute, it was like, you have to be a mouth-breathing tribal heathen to want anything other than completely unfettered immigration, preferably the instant dissolving of national boundaries, given that national borders are a retrograde primal imposition. They're pure artifice. There is no such thing as national borders. We're all one people, free flow of capital, free flow of labor, free flow of dollars and customers. So anything less than that utopianism was considered retrograde. And I myself, over the last 10 years, have been mostly following my intellectual heroes and becoming much more restrictionist. Really, I mean, a lot of that stuff is prompted, of course, by the election of Trump and very strong opinions about unfettered illegal immigration, because they're the ones who bear the wage suppression effects. That conversation with him, and you've seen it, it's not me saying, Roy Beck, you're right about everything. We need to be taking immigration levels back to where they were in 1989. But it's me admitting to him that I'm also evolving and trying to work my way through this stuff, given that I find that, that libertarian utopianism to be kind of hopelessly naive and potentially economically counterproductive.
I think there's an irony here from the point of view of African-American interest, which is the irony about concerns of unauthorized entry across the southern border are racist, and that's a kind of civil libertarian, civil rights, anti-discrimination claim that Blacks should be friendly to. The people are concerned that the country is going to be undermined because of the entry of people who don't originate in European ports of call. The irony I'm thinking of is that, on the one hand, that's an appealing posture for many Black interest advocates. This idea of a big coalition of non-whites, a broad attack on American white supremacist thinking, a coalition of peoples of color, advocating for the interests of peoples of color, that has a certain appeal. On the other hand, the African-American claim on the nation's attention to redress the consequences of the history of African-American exclusions going all the way back to slavery, that claim is nested within the larger American national narrative. It's an American claim, and it presupposes the existence of a national framework and context within which that claim can be prosecuted. So the obliteration of borders and the denial of there being any interest in the project, the American project, the specifically nationalist ambitions and undertakings of we Americans, is sort of cuts against the story that we Black Americans, I think, want to be telling to ourselves and to the country about what's the right thing to do for our country. Absent our country, I don't know where that argument goes. Does it go to the United Nations? Does it go to the World Court? No, I mean, it's an American argument. It's an argument about what is the character of our country. And the equation of Black claims with the claims of residents of Venezuela who would like to be residents of the United States of America obliterates the specifically nationalistic character of the Black struggle. It's an American struggle, which is why your and Roy Beck's quoting of Frederick Douglass really appealed to me. I mean, I get it. I get that W.E.B. Du Bois sitting in 1910 looking at what was going on in the country might have, said, well, we got some questions here about, our African Americans at the back of the queue now, where the queue is going to, be lengthened by every aspirant sitting in Southern or Eastern Europe who would like to be at Ellis Island. Are we now at the back of the queue? That kind of
Right.
concern.
But I mean, I think you saw the interview. I specifically said to Roy Beck, again, one of the most infamous, famous immigration restrictionists in America. I said that the Statue of Liberty and people coming here for a better life, the great golden dream of America, is it like it's wonderful. Like I have this incredible book about the creation of the Statue of Liberty that was co-written by David Eggers, who's a kind of very famous novelist that I'll read to my kids at least once or twice a month. And it's about this idea of like what it represents and this symbol of opportunity and freedom, and the idea that America is a creed and a set of ideas, and that radicalism that it's open to people of any race or ethnicity or religious persuasion. It's just about, you can come here and you get exceptional, unprecedented, miraculous levels of freedom and opportunity, but in turn you have to adhere to a certain creed of like personal responsibility and things like that. It's so wonderful. Like it is wonderful. But at the same time, I guess I wonder if I started questioning my libertarian orthodoxy about the moral imperative of the dissolution of international borders right around the time that Trump got elected, specifically as it relates to the idea that unfettered or exceptionally high volumes of immigrants. I was worried about the cost that they have when it comes to culture. First culture, just the idea of America has an exceptional operating software, and you can assimilate people, bad word, triggering word, if immigration levels are, at a certain level. But if they're too big, and Reihan Salam, your colleague at Manhattan Institute, is extremely eloquent about this. Once it gets above a certain threshold, that assimilation stops, and people create these little these self-contained clusters in which there isn't that seeping in of this unique, miraculous American cultural creed, right?
Well, right. I can hear the counter argument, which is if we go back to the heyday of Ellis Island, 1890 to 1920, and we look at the flows of people coming from Russia and Italy, having been coming from Ireland for quite some time, coming from Eastern Europe and so on into the United States, they were, relative to the size of the population at that time, a larger influx of, quote, foreigners than we are now experiencing. And we did somehow manage fitfully and over decades to, quote, assimilate these newcomers. These newcomers were not selected because they had high education or because they could put $100,000 in the bank. They were the teeming masses of Europe, and they came in very large numbers. And nativists of that era would have made arguments not dissimilar, perhaps not as eloquent as Reihan, but not dissimilar to the ones that you cite Reihan as having made. And history has shown them to have been wrong.
Right. Well, and then what Roy says is, well, let me put it this way. So my children also watch The American Tale, which is this cartoon from the cartoon movie from the 1980s produced by Steven Spielberg. And it's about this mice family that is in one of the Soviet satellite states that immigrates to America. And the mice sing these songs about this golden dream of opportunity of America, best embodied in this song called "There Are No Cats in America," right? So they sing this song about there not being any cats in America as they're on their way to Ellis Island. But once they get to America, they find out that there are actually cats in America, right? That the fantasy doesn't necessarily match reality, which is not to say there isn't something beautiful about the American operating software, the American idea, the American experiment. But Roy Beck, in our interview, does point out to me that in terms of the raw economic numbers of economic mobility or economic well-being, a lot of the people that came through Ellis Island either flatlined or actually there was slight regression in terms of their actual material well-being when they came to America. Now, it's probably a different story with their great-grandkids, obviously, but you don't want to get blinded by the fantasy to what actually happened to the people that came to America. I don't know what to make of this, Glenn. I still don't have strong opinions about what we ought to be doing, but I'm trying to live in the flux and hear opinions from people people that might be able to sharpen my thinking.
What do you say when someone accuses you of giving aid and comfort to great replacement theory theorists?
My standard issue my standard issue answer to any sort of cheap ad hominem social media attacks is to say what Kanye West says when he's accused of similar things, right? Every time Kanye just says, as a genius Christian billionaire, nobody's going to take my opinion from me. And I'm just going to say that, like, nobody's going to take my opinion from me as a genius Christian billionaire. Like, I don't care. I don't care. What are they going to do? What are they going to do? And I want to talk to you about this. I mean, with your successes. I mean, you know, obviously with your incredible successes, what you like, there's a lot of people that are in our realm building these new media operations, right? That you can sit and see what the mainstream prestige media institutions are like, and they're uniformly ideologically corrupted and exceptionally intellectually shallow, right?
I agree.
And I mean, you ought to bitch about that. That's unfortunate. One of the projects that we're working on now, starring John McWhorter, is about precisely the profound ideological corruption and intellectual shallowness of all the major global media operations. But that failure, that institutional failure and mediocrity, also creates incredible opportunities, right? People are like thirsting for good stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why Glenn Loury can have like a super successful Substack and podcast. Because people are like, I am so desperate for something that's not childish and so clearly playing along to a kind of staid partisan script. And that's basically what we're trying to do too, is see that corruption and that failure as an opportunity, not just bitch about it indefinitely, you know?
Sounds good to me. That's a pep talk. I'm inspired.
Yeah, I'm trying.
But wait a minute, you went to Brown and your first job was Cato? I mean, help me figure that out.
Come on, man. There's no father to the style. What do you want me to say? Yeah.
I want you to say, why didn't the indoctrination of Brown faculty circa, I'm going to guess 2000, when did you graduate from college?
2005, Glenn. I think it was a different place. I mean, you know, you would know much better.
That was the year I came to Brown, 2005.
So I'm saying we just missed each other.
Yeah.
I was the contrarian libertarian type. And of course, like, we still had the third world transition program where my second day at Brown, I'm being lectured about the knapsack of white privilege. Like, that stuff was still there. But I'd say I was a philosophy major. There was shockingly little political indoctrination. The only time that really happened was one of my like ancient philosophy professors, whenever she was trying to talk about like the Aristotelian conception of evil, would always use examples from the George W. Bush administration, like uniformly. That was the only time it was like, oh, there's an ideological slant here. But it wasn't, it's in terms of in the classroom, I don't think it was that bad. And then in terms of like public debates, I mean, my main activity at Brown was debate. I think, I mean, I was clearly in the minority, but it felt as if it was not so vicious. I just don't think it was as vicious back then, you know? And again, that turning point was that featured case of the first thing that we worked together, that 2013 shutting down of the speech by the New York City Police Commissioner. If you talk to anybody's in this space, like particularly Jonathan Haidt, they say that particular incident at Brown in 2013 represented like the turn of the epic. That is the focal, that is the hinge point where Brown back before then might have been like, you know, 95% progressive, but there was still a willingness to kind of engage with alternative perspectives. And like in 2013 is when it becomes like hysterical and censorious. And it's probably only gotten worse since then. So I just don't think it was the same.
I just want to tell people that what happened was Ray Kelly, who was commissioner of police appointed by Michael Bloomberg, 3 times elected mayor of New York City, came up to Brown to give a talk. I think he called it proactive policing. I think that's right. The label that he gave to what he was trying to defend. And he was talking about stop and frisk. He was talking about officers taking the opportunity to look inside the pockets of suspicious people who might be carrying weapons on behalf of the project of keeping the city safe. Now, you can have different views about stop and frisk policing. It was, as I say, the policy of a democratically endorsed mayor of the country's largest city on behalf of how do we get the murder rate down from over 2,000, which is what it had been in the early 1990s, to under 300, which is what it bottomed out at during the early aughts. So that was what Ray Kelly came to talk about. And an organized group of students and townspeople shouted him down. They stood up as he was beginning to give his remarks, and they talked over him, and they had their signs and they had their slogans: no justice, no police, no peace, no racist police was one of them. I remember it vividly because I was sitting in the front row of the auditorium that was packed. It was at capacity, and I'm in the front row only because, as a member of the faculty, I had, some leverage. And when I came late and all the legitimate seats were taken, they had set aside some seats for law enforcement personnel at the front of the auditorium. And so next to me on the left was a beefy Cranston, Rhode Island police captain.
Yeah.
And I'm up there, and Ray Kelly is trying to give his talk. And this went on, this interrupting thing, for about 10 or 15 minutes until the authorities called the whole thing off, and Kelly, in disgust, left campus and went immediately back to New York City. After which, of course, there ensued a lot of navel gazing, a lot of back and forth. Various faculty committees were appointed to investigate.
A lot of committees. Yeah,
reports were written, equivocating and splitting the difference, not standing up firmly for free speech, not going after in a disciplinary way the students who had broken rules about how to comport yourself in our community when they prevented a lecture from being given because they disagreed with the content of the lecture. An outrage at a university campus. And it certainly set me off. It changed my life in the sense that I said, what are we here for? What? This was a tragic day for the university, I thought. And of course, I still have people colleagues amongst my faculty here who defend the event and how the university handled it. The student leader who graduated the following summer and the following May with an Africana Studies concentration was awarded as recognition for their outstanding student leadership and so on. But the values of the institution, I thought, had been significantly diminished, had been offended against by what happened there.
Right. And so, Glenn, what happens when between 2013 and 2022, you got a solid decade of each new crop of America's cognitive elite is being washed and educated in institutions like Brown that enable things like that to happen, right? Like crop after crop after crop. And most of them, I don't think, get radicalized. I think the percentage of the student body that would participate in the shutting down of a Ray Kelly speech is like 5-10%, right?
Max.
But it's like 50 to 60% either are taught to, you need to be a good ally. And if not publicly support it, not criticize it or not subject it to rigorous investigation, right? The vast majority of people, it's the kind of silent, complicit majority. Oftentimes, you need to be the silent, complicit majority if you want to continue to rapidly ascend the lucrative ranks of the American meritocracy. You get a decade plus of the cognitive elite get trained that way, and then they filter into the institutions that are the institutions that set the narrative about America. Not just the New York Times, not just CNN, but institutions like that. And enough of them begin to occupy these institutions and push out the boomers, right? And then George Floyd happens. It's like, and then like, what happens? It's like, what happens? What catastrophic mismanagement by the American elite is what you get under times of extreme stress, right? And that's just like the two new docs that we're about to put out both deal with basically different sides of that puzzle in the summer of 2020.
Well, you've been working in this very rich vein for quite some time, And I mean, yeah, I'm buying your narrative. I'm buying your narrative that you take Brown and you multiply it by 50. You take, the 50 most elite campuses and you multiply that by 1,000. Those are the flows of kids coming out. They go into the media. They go into journalism. They go into academia. They go into corporate America in various positions, and they bring a certain mindset with them, and that affects what movies and TV shows get made. That affects whether or not a 1619 project gets stood up. That affects whether or not editors end up getting cashiered because they use their op-ed page to voice the wrong opinion at certain publications, and so on and so forth. That ends up with a summer of civil disorder, violence, and rioting being characterized as mostly peaceful protests. And I damn well dare you to say it was anything other than that. That ends up with a fraudulent civil rights movement like Black Lives Matter being lionized.
Let's go. Come on, Glenn.
I'm just getting warmed up, Rob.
I know, Glenn. I know. So, but I mean, but I think it's also in the summer of 2020 with that profound ideological corruption of the people that run COVID policy and also define the narrative about race relations in America. They're dead wrong, and they enforce their dead wrong orthodoxy through muscular censorship. Who ultimately bears the costs of that, right? And it's not the people of the Ivy League. It's not the tenured faculty, right? It's the working class. It's the people that are well outside the laptop class, that didn't go to the Ivy League, that don't have fancy liberal arts degrees, right? They're the people that suffer from violent disorder, and they're the people that suffer when you start incinerating jobs in response to a novel virus, right? And the two big things that we're about to put out kind of attempt to make that point about, we don't forget, like there's still a body toll. And even though it hasn't come to Providence, it's still there. It's still there.
Tell me about these two projects.
Again,
forthcoming. There's only so much you can say.
Well, I mean, okay, the one of them starring again this Columbia linguist you might be familiar with, John McWhorter. And
John and I do every other week on the off weeks. John and I do the Glenn
I feel like
show.
you guys would get along.
We've been doing it for almost 15 years. I mean, going back to 2007,
And I will say this, dude. He knew this when he signed up. His co-star interview in this is former Trump Attorney General Bill Barr.
You got Bill Barr. Bill Barr and John McWhorter.
So the title of it, I'm not going to give the whole game away, but the title of it is called The Broken Boys of Kenosha. And it's Jacob Blake, Kyle Rittenhouse, and the lies we still live by. And what we've found with it, there was these dual viral incidences in the back half of the summer of 2020. Jacob Blake, who I'd imagine I know you, and then also your.
Oh, we've talked about it at length.
Yeah, I know you guys. Your audience is going to be familiar. And then his shooting is what prompts Kyle Rittenhouse to come down to Kenosha 3 days. Takes these dueling viral incidences and tries to kind of the martyr. The classic unarmed black male getting gunned down by a white supremacist police officer. On the flip side, a Fox News conservative media crowd, Kyle Rittenhouse is a Second Amendment hero, right? He's an unadulterated hero. Let's put him up on a poster. Both of those narratives miss what actually happened. And we have found like kind of a theoretical framework that is correct, that I missed, that connects Blake and Rittenhouse and both of the people that Rittenhouse murdered. There's a similar shared, extremely important trauma shared between the four of them that never got discussed. So
you say Rittenhouse murdered these people, but of course he's going to say he acted in self-defense. Do you take a stand in that regard?
He did act in self-defense. But the idea that it falls to an adolescent with an AR-15 to defend private property is an obscenity.
Yeah.
Right? And we have the story as to how that came about.
I see.
And it's largely why it is that he was there and what had happened to render him needed in those circumstances is hasn't totally been properly told. And yeah, and I think it's a subject near and dear to my heart. But I think it also, what we're trying to do with it, it's going to cut through any sort of neat partisan. Like John McWhorter does his thing where he just like devastates woke orthodoxy in it, but we go to kind of deeper levels than that. You have to clear away the moronic narrative that was foisted upon it before it happened. But what really happened doesn't fit any neat partisan packaging. And we're gonna run a risk in terms of the audience that it's gonna get, but it does happen to be an accurate reflection of reality. So
you're meaning that both for left and right wing extremists, they're going to be unhappy because you don't affirm their narrative of the events.
No. And it does, no. Yeah,
now, don't I recall correctly that both President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, this is during the 2020 campaign, do I not recall correctly that they made a hero out of Jacob Blake? They talked to him from his hospital bedside. They wished him, good luck as he was kidnapping his kids and, attacking a police officer and so forth and so on. And begging to be dealt with harshly in terms of how it was that he was conducting himself. I mean, he's hardly a hero. You don't wish a crippling gunshot wound on anybody, but he was hardly a poster child. And yet the Democratic candidates for president and vice president lionized this guy as if he were a hero. And it went without comment in the media, as far as I could tell.
There's no accountability. That's why we're still
slapped their forehead and said, what the fuck?
No. And it's even told McJohn this. There was about the number of lies related to that shooting are even deeper than you or John know at this point. There's even more things about it that were active, flat out fabrications. But it's like, you don't want to start sounding like a weird tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, but I've now consumed all the media coverage related to the shooting, right? And it gets a little weird when every single media operation is repeating the same set of lies. Like, I'm not saying it's the Illuminati. It's a coordinated conspiracy. It's kind of like a soft conspiracy because everybody that runs these organizations all went through Brown and they know the script they're supposed to follow. So there doesn't need to be a Slack channel for all the producers at ABC and NBC and CNN and all the nightly shows. But they all act in coordination and in conjunction and repeat the same fabrications. And it's grotesque. It's incorrect. Ends up doing deep damage. What's infuriating, Glenn, is it ends up doing deep damage to precisely the people that these people want to claim to care about, right? Like they get all of their sense of self-satisfaction and moral righteousness because of their defense of the black boy. Like, who do you think bears the cost when you lie about the attempted kidnapping of black boys, right? Like who bears the cost of that?
Yeah, the next mother down the line whose boyfriend is a nutcase and who decides to drive off with her kids is going to bear the cost because maybe the cop is going to not be as aggressive in dealing with it or whatever.
Right. And
but let me just say this: you say you don't believe in conspiracy. It doesn't have to be a conspiracy. I mean, we have this idea in economics called the focal point. The focal point is where tacitly we all know something and we converge on it, and it's stable because everybody else is converging on it. Tom Schelling, the late great economist and a friend of mine, used to tell this story about, he says, suppose we were in New York City and we were going to meet, but our phone got cut off before we could agree when and where. What would we do? Well, we'd show up in the middle of Times Square at noon. We go to Times Square and we go there at noon. That would be what we would imagine the other guy would think that we were thinking. These people, having been indoctrinated, as you point out, know what the other guy thinks I'm supposed to be thinking, and they just jump on that bandwagon. This is it doesn't have to be a conspiracy. It doesn't have to be a room where everybody meets and decides what to do.
Right, and nobody's held accountable, I think, is some of the frustration. But part of the reason that we're able to punch above our weight class and get people like you to participate in our docs, or get Bill Barr, the two-time Attorney General, to participate.
Congratulations.
He's equally frustrated with, he turns down the CNN interview request and says yes to Good Kid Productions, just a couple rebels in Richmond. Like, he'll say yes to us because he knows, like, we see what he sees. We see what he sees. And so that's part of also pouncing on the opportunities that are afforded us by the complete and catastrophic failure of the kind of mainstream prestige institutions, including the Ivy League institutions, as we made abundantly clear in the Roland Fryer doc. Let me also say we have some COVID contrarian stuff dropping as soon as next week. And it, again, there's just stories that don't get picked up because they don't fit the narrative you're taught sophomore year at Brown University. And we're just
contrarianism, which it's safe to do now, but a year ago you would have had your head handed to you for doing it.
I know. I think about that too. If I'm like kind of a wuss for having not, we did a little bit, you know. I know. I mean, you know, it is safe now that we've been vindicated, but people are still desperate for it. I mean, we put up an interview with Jay Bhattacharya and it's a 90-minute uncut, unproduced interview with Jay, and it got tons and tons of views because people are, again, they're completely disenchanted with the kind of the mainstream institutions. I do think that something about summer 2020 broke the faith of a lot of people. Like we always knew that there was a level of corruption and competence, but multiple months of just straight ubiquitous propaganda, I think, breaks that faith. And now it's like, okay, what are the institutions that emerge from the ashes of that, you know? And you're doing it and we're trying to do it and other people are trying to do it as well. Yeah.
Sounds good. What has been the fallout on the Roland Fryer piece? This was a defense of Fryer, the Harvard economist who has been sanctioned by the university for allegedly engaging in sexual harassment in the laboratory that he ran there, suspended without pay for 2 years, recently reinstated. And I'm just wondering, I was very happy to see the doc screened at the old Parkland conference in Dallas that I've spoken about here at the Glenn Show, and that I was one of the principals in organizing. But has any mainstream media picked up on it? Has there been any feedback, pushback, anything? Yeah.
Well, there's no pushback, Glenn, because it's dope and it's correct. What are they going to say? What are they going to say to your monologue in that about the bow tie wearing professional class of Black intelligentsia at Harvard? What do they got to say? Like, there's nothing. You just got to sit. You just got to sit and take it. You just got to sit and take it. I guess, yeah, I mean, yeah, I certainly didn't get invited on Good Morning America.
Aha.
It's done extremely well. It's done extremely well. For me, I thought it would be a success if it did well enough that if you Google his name, it's on the first page of results, and it is now. So it's about narrative, trying to change the narrative about him, something that counterbalances the like New York Times hit piece. But yeah, I mean the Brown graduates that are the executive producers of the daytime shows aren't going to invite me on. That's right. Nobody watches their stuff anyway. Like CNN Plus is dying an instant death within a week of its release. And meanwhile, when they attempt to cancel Joe Rogan, that very week they tried to cancel Joe Rogan because of his COVID contrarianism, he gained 2,000 subscribers. So I guess I feel like a lot of these dinosaur institutions are being rendered increasingly irrelevant anyway. So who cares? It's like, just take the opportunities that are presented to you. Yeah, but you know, as far as the material benefits to the man himself, I do not know. I mean, I wish that it could have elicited. I wish that Harvard had said the beauty and the analytical acuity of this 24-minute documentary on the Good Kid Productions YouTube channel is so powerful. Now, formally apologize for the grave injustice that we inflicted upon this man, and we restore his named, chaired, his named professorship. But I don't think that's going to happen. I just don't think that's going to happen.
I saw a letter, and I just can't remember the name of the guy. He's a big hedge fund type financier in Boston, a Harvard alum, and a member of the overseers at Harvard. Written to Larry Bacow, who has stepped down now as president, but had been president during the period when the Roland Fryer incident arose. in which he lambasted. Gosh, I wish I could remember. I'll look it up and we'll include it in the notes here. The president back out and the top administration of the university along a number of fronts. One of them was how the university had responded to the COVID crisis by shutting down and whatnot, creating a bad example, not thinking through, not looking at the evidence.
Wow.
Just kind of reflexively. And then the other was, well, there were three. One was about boycott, divest, and sanction, the extent to which Harvard had allowed space for the anti-Israel movement or whatever. So this was this guy's view about that. But the final complaint to Bacow was about Fryer. Why did not you protect this wonderfully creative, brilliant, important member of our faculty here from this, flimsy, insubstantial, bullshit sexual harassment case? I mean, why was your instinct to jump on the Me Too bandwagon and the Title IX bandwagon and eviscerate this guy when the underlying factual circumstance was so thin? And your film was cited in this letter as evidence, on behalf of the larger
Oh man,
case.
you guys send that. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to look it up. I'm going to look it up because the letter has been very widely spread. I think it was privately sent to Bacow, but got leaked. And I will look it up.
This dude cited the doc?
He mentions the film. I don't think he cited the name of the film or the filmmaker, but he mentions the doc as a part of the larger.
He does not refer to me as a once in a generation auteur. That's unfortunate.
Unfortunately, not yet, but that's coming, Rob. That's coming. So you're content to make these 20-minute shorts or whatever? Is that your genre, or you're thinking about Hollywood? Nobody's calling to get you to try to where's the heterodox TV? Where's the 21st century's All in the Family kind of idea?
This is a soft spot for me. This is going to become like an emotional therapy session. I'm very happy with the docs. Do my ambitions exceed where we are currently at? 100%. Yes. Have I had some very light conversations with people that operate within the mainstream? Yes. But Glenn, I'm happy to put the hours in and happy to hustle to try to get on larger platforms if I thought there was a remote possibility that it would result in anything. But it still feels like trying to play in that world is a waste of time. I mean, there are people at Netflix or Amazon and other production houses that have corresponded with me, but it's all on the down low. And I think the Roland thing is the best thing we've ever made, you and I have ever made, Josh and the team has ever made. But part of it is we took an extra month to get the production value at the level where it could be on a Netflix, right? To spend the time and the money to show we can do heterodox, anti-woke, provocative, muscular, smart investigations, but we sacrifice nothing in terms of production quality, right? We're playing at your level in terms of animation and cinematography and editing, but we're saying stuff that is mad problematic. It was trying to prove that you could do those two things at the same time. And that's created opportunities for us, but it's not as if, I'm not taking Zoom meetings with Netflix VPs. I mean, I don't know, but what are you going to do? I mean, are you content for substance? I've said that you should be the most famous public intellectual in America right now. You should be getting the Ibram X. Kendi $10 million BU deal. I assume you're not, because you happen to be mad problematic with your politics, right?
$10 million is chicken feed, as you know.
Okay.
I mean, if I were content to run in a little seminar room somewhere up on the 5th floor of an office building on Boston University's campus, $10 million is a lot of money.
Okay.
But in real life, we all know that $10 million is not. So that's a personal question. I'm in my 70s, as you know. I know it doesn't show, but it's true. My wife is in her 50s. and I'm hoping for some decades of domestic tranquility and experience of the let's enjoy, smell the roses and drink the wine and etc. So I got to figure out what I want to do with my time, and I'm not as driven as I was when I was younger. I don't think I have anything to prove. I've got all the accolades and all that kind of stuff. So the question is, what do I want to do with my time? I have actually decided, I've mentioned this here before, to enter into a phased retirement understanding with Brown University. I'm going half-time in my teaching and cutting back on my administrative work. And after 3 years, I'll step down, which is a long story. No one's asking me to step down. I know I'm the conservative at Brown University. No one's asking me to step down. But no one's begging me not to either. And it's all good. It's appropriate. 74 years old, I don't want to be carried out of here, drooling and losing my way halfway through the lecture and whatnot like that. I mean, I've had a good run, 46 years as an academic. And, this last phase or this next phase, maybe something different. The podcast is fun. It's easy to do the podcast newsletter. Well, easy. I got to talk to guys like you. I've got a good team. I've got a good editor. I've got a good production, creative director guy that we work together. So that's good. My main thing now is to make sure that this time next year, on every bookstore shelf and at every internet online ordering, you can find a copy of The Enemy Within. That's my memoir in process that we're making really good progress on, and I'm very happy about it. So
I get asked about that memoir, by the way. People think that I was like, Glenn was finishing it when I first interviewed him for the Brown University documentary. That's what he said. He was out in Stanford in this like obscenely idyllic setting to complete his memoir. That's how I first met him. I assume it's been under the works since then, but there are many people that are eager to read it, Can I ask you, do you think though, I mean, let me see. This is part of your appeal though, right? Is like, you are critical of woke orthodoxy, but the fact that you're at Brown is an essential part of that package, right? It shows like you can play in their, like you can play at the highest levels of intellectual achievement and in their game, and you still criticize it, right? There are plenty of people that I love and follow that can do that second part, not as well as you do, but can criticize it. But there's that added thing that you can do both at the same time. Is there a way though, like once you retire, are you basically the last of that breed? Is there any space at all for the next generation of Lourys who are willing to be critical of it, but that also have an opportunity to ascend it, Or is it just become so ideologically inhospitable that once you're gone, everybody just has to retreat to the think tanks or to Substack? Like there's nobody that's going to come up within the system itself that can critique it.
Wow.
Do you know? What do you think?
No, it's a good question. It's true. I mean, not only Brown being a bastion of, woke, politically correct thinking, and me being a standout within that environment, and therefore having as a part of my brand, not only have I brought a conservative critique, but I've done so in the teeth of or in the face of the Trisha Rose cadres of the world, and have survived and have the respect of my students and many of my colleagues, and certainly have a good track record as a scholar. But there's also something, about the prestige of the Ivy League and so on that lends a kind of cachet, a kind of seriousness, to the person. Oh, they were good enough to be included within that very elite cadre by their peers. He must be a serious person. He's got tenure at that kind of a place. That kind of thing. I think for my sake, personally, if I step away from Brown and become professor emeritus and stop teaching on a regular basis and in effect, surrender my sinecure here, which I think is appropriate given the stage of my career that I'm at. Some people say, hang on to the end, to the bitter end. I don't intend to do that. I'm stepping aside in part to make way for younger people. And when I say younger, I mean in their 40s. Who want that corner office and want access to the graduate students and all that kind of stuff. But will I have surrendered something important about my brand? And I think personally for me, I don't worry about that because I've got this long track record and, except for people who are coming along brand new and meet Glenn Loury for the first time today, everybody's going to know that Glenn Loury is a serious player. He's a fellow of the Econometric Society. He's a distinguished fellow of the American Economic Association. He's a member of the American Philosophical Society. He's a member of the American Academy of Arts and Science, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And he's a winner of the Bradley Prize. All that is just like, how are they going to take that away from me? They're not going to take that. No matter where I am, I'm still Glenn fucking Loury, like that. But the hard part of your question and the painful part of your question is, who's a young Glenn Loury who's going to come along at Cornell or at Columbia or somewhere and do a similar, John shouldn't be left out. John McWhorter, my conversation partner, is younger. He's not stepping down anytime soon. He'll be quick to tell you that he is not in his 70s. He's in his 50s. So one could point him out. And, there are a few others, but no one as prominent as John. And perhaps no one is quite as prominent and distinguished within their particular field as your humble servant here. So I don't know.
I mean, this is not exactly right, but the next Glenn Loury was supposed to be Roland Fryer, right? And it's like, what happened to him? It's like, that's not exactly encouraging. And he's not exactly like you. He's not kind of, doctrinaire conservative, but in terms of, I've got intellectual chops. I can run at the highest possible level. I'm at the most prestigious institutions, and I'm willing to wow out and just critique this stuff because I think it's false. And it's like he got industrial strength canceled. So it's like, that's not encouraging in terms of the new crop.
I want to push back. I'm not giving up on my man Roland as a force to be reckoned with. I grant you he was set back. I grant you that his reputation was significantly damaged. I mean, there are people out there, you say Roland Fryer, and they basically think, oh, he's a pervert. I mean, that's horrible. That's horrible because it's false. And he didn't touch anybody.
Propaganda.
He didn't do anything in terms of proposition.
It's ridiculous.
So that's horrible. But Roland is a formidable human being, not just a great economist, the winner of the Clark Medal and so forth and so on. You can't take that away from him. He's a force of nature. I don't know if you guys talk much about this, but he started 2 companies, Reconstruction, which is about tutoring online, marketing to Black families, but not exclusively so, recruiting an army of trained tutors who will reinforce the secondary education curriculum for these kids in math and science and history and literature and so forth. And he with the former superintendent of schools of Washington, D.C., Kaya Henderson, has started a company, recruited hundreds of tutors, trained them, developed their product and marketing and so forth, raised I don't know how many millions of capital. I'm one of his investors, and have launched this enterprise. He's also launched a new company in the diversity, equity, and inclusion business, marketing their services to private corporations, human resource departments, saying to them, one way of responding to concerns about diversity is to have these Ibram X. Kendi type seminars where someone comes through and talks about, your inner racist and, combating white privilege and all that kind of, and they have these seances where everybody, affirms that, yes, we're going to be more inclusive. He says another way of doing it is to look at the data, analyze your internal wage and employment structures, find out whether or not there are disparities that are not accounted for by the productivity as measured by available data, and then look at your personal decision-making processes to try to identify where a problem might lie and correct it before somebody brings a lawsuit or embarrasses you with a protest or something like that, get ahead of the curve on your diversity issues, identify the problems using data and analytical techniques. And I think it's a brilliant idea, frankly, and he's cultivating clients on the second front as well. And this is his hobby. This is, he's still writing academic papers. He's still a professor at Harvard. So God's not finished with him yet.
Yeah. This is kind of sparked. I'm ruining the day that you're fully retired from Brown. And I'm not saying this is in the realm of the possible, but I want you to just dream with me. Okay, so Brown very famously has this open curriculum, right? Again, people are shocked when I tell them what it is. As an undergraduate, at least, there's no requirements that you take anything. You can take everything pass, fail. If you fail a class, it disappears from your transcript. And technically, you're allowed to fail up to 2 classes over the course of 4 years and still graduate on time. There's no pluses and minuses. It's just ABC, no credit. Right? It's about open intellectual exploration, self-directed intellectual exploration. I'm not saying that all of the nation's corrosive political dysfunction, particularly in the elite class, would be solved by this. But how much would be solved if just over the next 10 years, as part of your retirement, they kept the new curriculum, but every single undergrad at Brown has to take your race and policing class? Like, how much would that change things? I don't want to overstate it. But if you made all the new, like, woke elites have to at least confront Glenn Loury head on. You have to take it at some point before you leave. And even if you don't leave with the subscription to the Wall Street Journal, you at least have to face Glenn Loury demonstrating the full depth and breadth of your own ignorance about these things. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm not talking in the realm of the practical, but it's just like, how much would I feel as if that could just instilling that intellectual humility that's in such short supply, right, among the woke elite.
Not for me to say that, Rob, although I don't mind hearing it. I mean, from your lips to God's ears is almost what I want to say. Of course, you can't do it at Brown, given the open curriculum, and you couldn't do it anywhere, even if there weren't an open curriculum, because requiring them to take Trisha Rose is one thing. Requiring them to take Glenn Loury, that's indoctrination.
I see.
But I'll say this. The last time I taught the race crime and punishment course, I had over 100 students subscribe. Me and 2 TAs struggled mightily to handle all the papers that were being written and so on, among which were some surprisingly heterodox takes on, the issue of the day, crime, punishment, and policing, like, is defunding the police really a good idea if we're interested in the well-being of the people who live in high crime districts in the city and things of this kind? And I actually sent around a note to some of my friends where I just took a list of 10 or 12 of the paper topics for the final paper for the course, all of which had this heterodox, internally critical, I'm a progressive, but I'm not sure kind of quality to them.
Wow.
And I thought, my God, I'm making some headway here. I get a lot of pushback in class from kids. They say, oh, no, Professor Loury. I mean, and they have values that they think are different from my own. But the process of having to, grapple with the arguments that I'm making in class for these kids, I think is extremely instructive. So much so that one of my hecklers, this young woman, was sitting in the back, and I said something like, not all Black people think the same way. And then I went on to say something like, I was not offended by something that someone else took to be a microaggression. And she said, you should have been. And I said, who are you to tell me what I should have been offended by? I mean, think about that for a moment. I mean, how patronizing is that? I'm standing right here in front of you, and you're denying the evidence of your own lying eyes. There's a Black man who thinks a certain way by telling me what Black people should think. Let's interrogate that. And we went back and forth at that for maybe 10 minutes. It was respectful. but it wasn't a friendly exchange. Anyway, months later.
Well, go.
No, I just finished the story. Months later, I'm on the airplane, sitting in the first class section. I have to tell you, with my wife, and we're on our way out to the West Coast. And down the aisle comes this very same young woman whom I don't recognize. And she says, Professor Loury. And I say, yes. And she introduces herself and reminds me of who she is. And my eyebrow raises a little bit. She says, that intervention changed my life. It gave me an awful lot to think about. I never said anything to you now, but thank you.
Amazing.
So,
Glenn, I mean, I think the thing that your story is so powerful, though, it's not about counter indoctrination, right? It's not about you saying you need to subscribe to the cosmology of Thomas Sowell or whatever.
Right.
It's an injection of intellectual humility, and how important that is about injecting intellectual humility into the next crop of the cognitive elite, because they run the country. And the thing for me has always been, if you don't get it done in those 4 years, again, being intellectually humiliated by a mind that's much greater than yours is not pleasant, and you will not do it unless someone makes you do it. That's why there needs to be a structured intellectual market in which you are forced to do this. If you don't do it in those 4 years, I feel like you're never going to do it.
I prefer challenged to humiliated. I don't want to humiliate anybody.
I got humiliated as an undergrad. I'll just say I did, right? If you don't do it then, you just fall into your carefully curated ideological echo chambers. You move to Park Slope, you stay on Twitter, you just read the New York Times. Maybe you'll dabble in a Rachel Maddow monologue or two. All your friends are ideologically homogenous. And I'm not saying you're going to spend the rest of your life in an echo chamber, but that doesn't quite, that almost does accurately capture what life is like after that. And if you can get that injection of humility, I mean, for me, it was, you being forced to confront a mind that is inarguably much greater than yours, that is diametrically opposed to you on an issue of moral importance, is should be the core goal of an undergraduate education. And I got it because I was like a weird libertarian minority. But I do worry about it, and I think my worries have been vindicated given what happened in the summer of 2020, that there's shockingly little of that happening at the elite levels of education. And then at the non-elite levels, there's all sorts of other dysfunctions that have nothing to do with intellectual training. So that's amazing. That's amazing, Glenn. Yeah.
Okay, let me ask you this one, Rob. Donald J. Trump.
Oof.
Where are Good Kids Productions in the culture war battle that is only going to get hotter over the issue of the standing, the place within the American framework? Because a lot of stuff that you've been saying just now, just over the course of this last 45 minutes to an hour, sounds pretty Trumpian.
Is this a projection, Glenn? Is this because people say this to you? So, Glenn, this is a personal question because there is not an agreed upon orthodox opinion between me and my business partner of terms of what we think about Donald Trump. Here's the honest answer. My business partner, who comes from a much more working class, disadvantaged background than I do, who's a college dropout, who really had to work his way through crappy working class jobs to get to the point that he trained up to have enough technical skills to be a video producer, whereas I went to some fancy private schools, right? I think his biography makes him much more naturally enthusiastic about Trump, and more importantly, forgiving of his excesses, right? Forgiving of his excesses. And for me, I can't forgive the excesses. I can't. And I can't. And the thing that I make him confront is how, on his own standards, Trump failed COVID. He failed the pandemic. I've read the insider accounts. We have an interview with Scott Atlas that's about to be on the channel, who's like the main COVID contrarian, right?
Yeah.
Read his memoir, okay? Read his memoir. Trump within 6 weeks had good guerrilla instincts that the lockdowns, as architected by Birx and Fauci and the CDC director, were excessive in doing insane economic damage to the country. He's always been very good at, like, his primal political id is in the right direction. And that was accompanied by Absolutely zero follow through. Nothing. According to Atlas himself, Donald Trump, at the height of the pandemic, he outsources the entire COVID portfolio to Mike Pence. And Mike Pence, either because he's a true believer or maybe because of some like canny political strategy, he just defers entirely to basically the Ivy League technocratic woke class, right? And that's why the lockdown policies stay for a long time. And there's on his own merits, Trump failed his own working class constituency, right? And because of the cult of personality and because of celebrity worship, a lot of people are blinded to this, but they don't notice that he failed them and that his signature achievement is Operation Warp Speed, which produced a vaccine that they're being told by their media sources is a Bill Gates mind control conspiracy, right? So it's like, what is going on here? And again, I'm not going to monologue, but to have that be the case, Trump has good guerrilla instincts. I think that I like the direction he moved the party. He moved it in a more Reihan Salam type working class, economically populist direction. But he has, since the days he ran Trump hotels, he's completely catastrophically incompetent when it comes to logistical follow through. He is. And it does matter if your president doesn't know how to literally can't read things that are in less than 32-point font. It does matter. And at the same time, in this country, there being someone who has good guerrilla instincts, but also has logistical follow through and can read something that's longer than 3 sentences, i.e., Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
I was thinking that too.
And have DeSantis be running probably for president. The idea that you would consider the logistically incompetent guerrilla over the guy who actually executed and has the receipts on it is insane to me. So that's my position.
Yeah. Well stated. I think I.
What do you?
No, yeah. I mean, what I said when John McWhorter confronted me during our Q&A, we do a monthly Q&A, and John, someone had sent in a question about Sam Harris's alleged statement that it's okay to suppress the laptop story if that's what it takes to keep a guy like Trump from getting elected.
Yeah, and
I had gone on at some length about how I thought that was wrong. Although Sam has since clarified his position, and I might not have completely accurately described it at the time, I still think at the end of the day, Sam and I probably disagree about, whether Trump constitutes an existential threat to the republic of such a magnitude that, otherwise sensible and morally compelling rules should be violated to prevent his. My position was you have to persuade the voters that he's a bad idea as president of the United States. You don't preempt his political aspiration by, phony manipulation of the information flow and whatnot. So there's that. But John pressed me. He said, but you're not appalled by Trump. I'm appalled. He's an idiot. Yeah. He's an asshole. He's a moron. He's venal. And you seem, Glenn, to always be, kind of halfway apologizing for him. To which I responded, no, Trump did many appalling things. And I, like others, was appalled by the appalling things he did. On the other hand, I know that there's scores of millions of people who support him. And I know that he speaks for them when he talks about the border or when he talks about China or whatever. And in the culture war of which Trump is one participant, I'm not with those coastal elites. I'm with the blue collar Catholic cultural conservative auto worker in Youngstown, Ohio, or something like that, who is not so sure that the trans, fad is the thing of the future, who thinks Colin Kaepernick ought to get the fuck up off of his knees and be grateful that he's got a $10 million contract kind of guy. I mean, that guy and me the hypothetical Youngstown blue collar Catholic and me have a lot in common. And when Trump speaks and those people cheer, I feel heartened that there is at least some resistance to the otherwise kind of self-righteous, self-important, these elites are not that clever. They're not that clever, I say. So I have some sympathy.
But that's not what I asked you, though. I said DeSantis versus Trump. What could possibly be the plausible argument of favoring Trump over DeSantis?
No, I agree with you. There isn't any. I just read DeSantis' speech to the National Conservatism Conference where he explained about COVID and stuff like that. And Brother DeSantis made a lot of sense to me. And, obviously he's catching flack now for sending those Venezuelans up to Martha's Vineyard.
Savvy.
Which was a stunt, but I mean, not every stunt, I mean, is, sometimes you need a stunt in order to shake up the debate.
You need to internalize the cost of luxury beliefs, right? Like, I'm sure that Skip Gates in Martha's Vineyard can wax poetic about the need to embrace the fellow humans that are coming from Venezuela. And I like that DeSantis calls him on his bluff. He's like, okay, bro, then you clothe and house and feed them. Come on. You don't just get to wax poetic about it anymore on PBS.
He's engaged in human trafficking, according to some of the zanier left-wing critiques of DeSantis.
That's because they have nothing to say. They have nothing to say,
Yeah.
And this DeSantis thing is happening. Like, the New Yorker profile of him, Dexter Filkins, it was not exactly a flattering piece, and it comes with all the woke Ivy League, whatever ruling class baggage. Even within that, it made it through copy editing, a paragraph in which he essentially admits that the Florida model was superior to the California model. And at the point, the New Yorker is admitting this, is okay, this is penetrating into the discourse. There's people are beginning to realize the mistakes that were made.
What do you think the chance is that Trump, in his wisdom and magnanimity, might ascend to the position of kind of honorary chairman of the movement and let an operational officer and CEO type actually run for the presidency?
See, now I'm just going to do what McWhorter does, but he's much smarter and more eloquent than I am. Where I think when you say things like that, I don't know if you're totally being serious. I do think you may not ignore, or maybe don't fully appreciate the extent of the psychopathic features of Trump's personality. And I really mean that. Having read many, many insider accounts of Trump as a Homo sapien, a breathing, living human being who coughs and needs to take naps occasionally. What is his actual personality? That he's got some very good characteristics, but he is psychopathic. He's a narcissistic psychopath. I know I sound like Andrew Sullivan right now, but you don't need to read, go read the insider accounts of there's plenty of them, people that are politically sympathetic to Trump that think he's insane. That they think, because he is insane. He's insane. And you just, anytime he's given power, you are playing with fire. You are. And that has to be accounted for. And I do think, as someone who's imbibed a lot of your commentary about him, I think that your critics are right that sometimes you don't properly appreciate that fact. I don't want to get into debate with Glenn Loury.
No.
You know what I mean?
You probably win this one, it sounds like. And I have to make a confession here, and I appreciate your candor, Rob. I appreciate you not, going easy on me. The thing is, I realize this thing about myself. Sometimes I'm so pissed off at the other side, and their tactics and their whatever, that I kind of become blinded to some stuff. And the idea, Trump is an existential threat to an American democracy. He must be stopped at all costs. He's a Putin puppet. He's a traitor. He's a racist. He's a et cetera. This kind of, he's personification of evil posture disgusted me. And repelled me. And in consequence, I perhaps have not given enough credence to what it is that you've just said, which is the man's insane. He doesn't see the wisdom in what you, Glenn Loury, are prescribing, which is he's already had a tremendous impact on American politics. If he were to go into the history books as a guy who served one term as president, but who nevertheless fathered a movement that changed the course of American history, it wouldn't matter if it was Ron DeSantis or Donald J. Trump sitting in the Oval Office. He can't see that. It's all about the visceral. It's all about a satisfaction of the immediate ego, maniacal, etc. And I perhaps have not given that sufficient space in my own thinking. And as a result, while I don't come out voting for Trump, whenever, I had this pat answer, who are you going to vote for? I'm going to vote for Joe Biden, of course. But you shouldn't believe me, because even if I were going to vote for the other guy, I wouldn't tell you. So your question is completely without content. It only has one acceptable answer. The answer is uninformative about my actual. That was my little device to kind of dodge the Trump problem.
and I don't think this is the reason they're doing it, but the new bumper crop of like Trump populist Senate candidates like JD Vance and Blake Masters, they obviously have been very strategic about cultivating the Trump MAGA base, and they know that that endorsement was part of the reason that they succeeded in the primaries.
Yeah.
But particularly a guy like Masters has explicitly said trying to pioneer Trumpist policies after Trump. He doesn't say without Trump. Like, he doesn't insult the man because he doesn't want like the holy terror to rain down on him. But some of these guys are also, and DeSantis also is trying to navigate this, where you pay due deference to the policy evolutions that he made the Republican Party go through, but like try to say like, we need to be able to survive beyond this. And I guess that's basically where I'm at too. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, we've done Trump. Thanks for an hour of your time, Rob. I really appreciate it. And the new projects sound very exciting. And I'm still available. You can recruit me as a participant when the next thing comes down the line.
Well, it's funny you say that. You're going to get an email to me this week about something new to exactly that effect. But I don't want to spoil it for the general public. But there's that you will be getting an invite. I mean, I want to squeeze you for all the brilliance I can. You know, I want to get all of it. So I definitely appreciate it. Yeah.
Have you heard from Kanye? People need to know that Rob Montz in his youth was and perhaps still is, a rabid hip hop fan, and that he's a great admirer of the genius.
My youth. Why do you feel like you have to say that as if people, when they see me, they don't see gritty urban authenticity? I don't understand why you're making that assumption, Glenn. All they see right here is someone who's earned his reps in the school of hard knocks. Under no circumstances has it changed. The Alexa in my house with me and my 3 kids and my wife, all it plays is the Encanto soundtrack, the Mary Poppins soundtrack, and the collected works of Biggie Smalls. That's all we bump in my house. That's for real, real. No, and I don't know. I actually lean into it even more. Now, I mean, we don't need to get into this, but Glenn, like rap music, 90s rap music is one of my like 3 favorite things about human existence. I'm not even joking. Like, I'm approaching 40. I'm trying to be honest with myself. That's just for real. It's in my top 3 thing. I have 3 children. Okay. There's a chance rap music has bumped one of the, and I'm very specific about the era that I was raised on. It's very different in terms of the philosophy and it's not, there's a nihilism in the newest iteration of rap, but the stuff that I grew up on, like 89, like 97 that's gospel for me. It is.
You say really Biggie, what about Tupac? What about Dre?
But I feel like there's very few things in the world that I could claim to have authentic, genuine world-class expertise in. But what you're trying to step into right now that's what it is. Like, this is something I know a lot about.
Okay, this is what you do. I'm not claiming any knowledge. I'm just asking a question.
In terms of technical ability as a lyricist, like Biggie is light years beyond Tupac. And I mean, there's a fake ass artifice to Tupac as well. I know a lot about that man. And the thug, this is sound ridiculous. The thug posture was a choice. And it was a marketing choice. It was a commercial branding choice. For Biggie, it was not. He was actually selling crack cocaine when he was 17. Tupac Shakur was a soft-spoken art student, all right? And there was, in his early 20s, either through conscious, cynical branding positioning, or maybe because like just organically following what was profitable or popular, he adopts this persona. And for me, once you know the reality of his biography, it breaks a little bit of the spell. He's still amazing. But
well, Suge Knight is a thug, right? I mean, Death Row was not just an artifice, and you know, I mean, there were some hard guys in there, no?
Yeah,
I'm asking you. You know, this is your
but Suge Knight's a genuine. It was like a genuine brutal gangster, right?
Yeah.
And Tupac also left Death Row. There's a reason why. I mean, there's only so much violent dysfunction like even he could take. Dre left death row. I mean, I think Snoop Dogg left death row. There's a fakeness to it. There's artifice to it. And also just, I mean, it really is just like, this is so dorky, but like technical verbal virtuosity. This is real. I'm telling you, this is real, Glenn. This is cringy and ridiculous, but I love what I do in part because of the writing that we get to do, the voiceovers, the script work.
Yeah.
I love working with you because like you have incredible way with language. And as I deepen and try to cultivate that in myself, like part of that's like reading the collected essays of Joan Didion, but part of it's also revisiting like Biggie albums. Because in terms of like verbal playfulness and innovation, he's just like otherworldly genius. He really is. And there's guys that like get close to him. Like the only modern rapper I like is Kendrick Lamar. I'd imagine you know who he is. But he, in terms of like poetry and playfulness and like moral sophistication, he's close. But it's just like Biggie's just like another level. He really is just another level. And it's just like the stuff you read, the stuff you listen to on repeat between the age of 11 and 16 just seeps into your bone marrow in a way that nothing else will, right? I know you have similar.
Well,
similar
Motown,
stuff.
man. Anytime I hear Smokey Robinson interviewed, I'm right there because that was it. That was it for me, man.
Because you're outside like hardens, you know, once you're 18, 19, 20, in a way that music, you could just live in it when you're that young. And I'm not saying I'm trying to feed it to my children, but you know, we'll just sprinkle a little bit Gangstar amidst the Encanto soundtrack and just see what takes root. I'm just trying my best.
You can tell Alexa to play
God
Biggie.
Damn it, I love that shit so much. It's like, it really is. Yeah, I love it. And also, if what we're trying to create with our videos is an authentic expression of what I think is like the dopeness, it's going to involve those kind of beats. It just is. It's ludicrous that I'm some dork who's doing it, but I don't care. I don't know, man. It's working well so far. We'll see. I don't know. Yeah, so I don't know.
People who have not seen some of Rob's videos should know that he often appears in his videos.
Yes,
and personifies this kind of hipness and this kind of raw,
don't put it like that.
Hip hop, etc.
Well, I think I'm sure you will, but I think if people have not seen our stuff, they should hopefully at least start with maybe Silence You Part 1. That's the first thing we ever worked on, and that includes the first time I had ever just had 45 minutes of uncut monologuing from anyone. It was in that doc with you. And the second time I ever did it was with the Roland Fire doc. And it's just, 30, 45 seconds, no visuals of just like Glenn Loury doing his Glenn Loury thing.
People can get this at your website.
They will like Silent You Part 1. They will like that.
They can get this at your website. We're going to tell them where to go.
Yeah.
And so on. Okay, Rob, I need to sign off. Thanks for your time. Great to talk to you. Look forward to working with you going